Good morning, online learners. Welcome to day 2. And we have Mr. Giovannini's class in front of us. Everybody say hello.
Hi. Hello.
That was Caroline. And everybody's smiling. Don't ask me how I can tell because they're all wearing masks, but they all look so happy to be here this morning. Right? Are we happy?
Yeah.
Everybody's
Definitely happy.
Yes, Gabe is happy, Reese is not. Okay, so we're going to continue with our discussion of cells and the building blocks of life. And I put some titles up on the board. There's our first one, Building Blocks of Life. Without cells, we do not have life. And then someone developed a cell theory. We're going to talk about that today. Then microscope development was very big. Can anyone tell me why that would be a big thing for cell theory and cell development and studying cells? Yes.
You can see them.
Yes, you can't see them without a microscope. So as microscopes became more powerful, we learned more about cells. So we're going to learn about that today. Then we're going to talk about parts of a cell. Guys and girls, this is where it gets a little bit difficult because the words are big, okay? And they're hard to pronounce. They would be hard to spell also. So as we're learning these words, what are you going to use for your quiz on Thursday to get ready?
Study guide.
Yes, thank you, Ava. Use your study guide because you can look at the word, you'll recognize it, you'll see what it means, and you don't have to worry too much about how it's pronounced or how it's spelled. If you can recognize it, someday if you become a doctor or a scientist, you'll know how to spell it, you know how to pronounce it. But for the purposes of 5th grade, let's just recognize that word and know that it's a part of a cell and it's going to help us learn about cells. So yesterday I read to you page A6. Today I'll read to you the cell theory and microscope development. By using new and improved microscopes, scientists were able to observe cells in detail. In 1838, so that was a while ago, guys. 1838, German scientist Matthias Sheldon compared different plants and plant parts. He concluded that all plants are made of cells. Another scientist drew the same conclusion about animals. 20 years later, German physician Rudolf Virchow reasoned that cells only come from other cells. These conclusions were eventually organized into the single theory known as the cell theory. The theory states, all living things are made of one or more cells. There's a little red dot next to that in our book. Why do you think they put a red dot next to it?
Because it's important.
Yep, it's important. And where might you see that again, Addison?
The next page.
No. Something that happens on Thursday. Help her out, Ava. Yes, test or quiz. So when you have something that's really in bold print or there's a little red dot next to it saying, hey, notice this, you're going to see it later. Here's another one. The cell is the smallest unit of a living organism. Cells come from other cells. Today, scientists continue to use new equipment and techniques to study cells. The additional evidence continues to support the cell theory. The next title is Microscope Development. The earliest microscopes used a single lens to collect and focus light. In time, 2 lenses were combined to form a compound light microscope. Its magnifying power is the power of each lens multiplied together. Modern light microscopes can magnify objects up to 2,000 times or 2,000x. That's powerful enough to see not just cells, but structures within the cells. The electron microscope came into use in the 1930s. Electron microscopes use rapidly moving electrons instead of light to make images of objects. Electron microscopes can magnify 40,000 times more. Today, the scanning electron microscope has taken this technology still further and allows scientists to study 3-dimensional structures of the surfaces of cells and other tiny things. So what amazes you about the cell theory or microscope development? Is anyone amazed by how powerful they are? Ava? They're very powerful. I mean, at first, you're just magnifying it a little bit. Then we get to 2,000, and I believe the last figure was 40,000 times more powerful than you could just see with your eye. So that's how small a cell is. And maybe it'll get you to appreciate a little bit what we're going through with the coronavirus. If something is that small, we have to be able to see it to figure out how it works and then how to treat it so that these viruses don't invade our cells. That's why we're not figuring this thing out overnight, because things are so tiny and you need very powerful microscopes and computers to figure out what's going on and how do we stop it. The good news, we have all that stuff. We just have to figure out how to put it to use and how to solve what we're going through right now. Any other comments? Okay, I've been talking to you about these big words, parts of a cell. Okay, so some of them aren't that big, but some of the words do get a little bit bigger. Why don't I just read you some of it instead of reading you everything? Cells contain even smaller structures called organelles. These structures perform specific functions in the cells. Nucleus. The nucleus directs the activities of the cell. It stores a molecule called DNA. Who's ever heard of DNA? Lots of people. With the use of studying DNA, something as simple as a drop of blood or a little bit of saliva from your mouth, scientists can gather that, or even police detectives, and they can tell who was at the scene of a crime based on the blood that's there or the saliva that was left at the scene. Okay? Reese?
They did that, there was a car accident in my house. They did that with this one lady, and she turned out being drunk.
Oh, yeah, some people are breaking the law. They've had too much to drink and they have an accident and they study their, I don't know so much if it's their DNA, but their blood alcohol content, and they can say, you probably had too much. So,
Her car was different.
yeah, that sounds like it was a terrible accident. So people,
No one was hurt, though.
oh, nobody was hurt. That's good. People have to be careful because scientists can study not just cells, but they can look at your blood and tell what you've been eating or drinking. Yes?
My mom and dad took DNA test, and we thought my dad was going to be more Italian, but my mom was only 6% Italian, and most of my dad
And they were able to figure out their nationality based on DNA? Okay, very interesting. Okay, so we have other words that we need to know. Cell membrane is the thin, flexible covering that surrounds all type of cells. We have the cell wall. In plants only, the cell wall is a rigid outer layer that surrounds the cell membrane. Cytoplasm. Who's ever heard of that word before? Cytoplasm. Again, if you look at how to spell it, Cytoplasm, it's a little bit tricky. Between the nucleus and the cell membrane is the cytoplasm. All of the remaining organelles are located within the cytoplasm. Some more vocabulary on page A9, ribosomes. Tiny ribosomes are scattered throughout the cell. Unlike most other organelles, ribosomes are not surrounded by membranes. They assemble compounds called proteins. Then we have lysosomes. They're small, ball-shaped organelles that help the cell break down nutrients and old cell parts. Vacuoles. Vacuoles are membrane-bound sacs that are filled with fluid. Here's a word that's kind of tricky. It's actually two words. Golgi apparatus. Who thinks they can remember that one? That's a tough one. What is the Golgi apparatus? It receives proteins, then processes them for shipment outside of the cell. Couple more words here for you. Chloroplasts. They're found only in plants and some protists. Chloroplasts contain pigments that absorb sunlight. Another word, mitochondria. Large peanut-shaped organelles called mitochondria are known as the power plants of the cell. Here's one of my favorite words. Endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum is a system of membranes and tubes. They twist and turn throughout the cell, creating passages through which materials pass. And that's it for our big words. But you can see we've had about 6 or 7 new words that you might never have heard before. Now, I was looking for a fun way to teach this last year, and I went on YouTube and I found an old Bill Nye video about cells, and it's really pretty funny, and all these words are mentioned in there. So I was thinking that maybe if I can still find that video on YouTube, after we take our quiz on Thursday, we'll have some extra time. Maybe we can watch an old rerun of Bill Nye, and he really explains the cell parts really well. Or you could watch it at home if you'd like. Just Google Bill Nye and cells, and it's a really neat video that has little songs and different things. It makes this not as intimidating. All this information is found on pages A6 to A11 in your textbook and on your study guide. So it would be a good idea to read your study guide. I'll give you a paper copy tomorrow, but you can also read this on Google Classroom. Your study guide is on Google Classroom. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. What we're going to do now is we're going to end the video, and we're going to look for our daily journal entry based on a website. Now, guys, let me tell you, the internet here at school is very slow. They're having problems. So if you're having problems at school or at home, you could take any page in your book and write a summary. And on your journal entry where it says start typing here, just put a page number and summarize the page number. Pick one of these words, tell me a little bit of what it's about, and if you want to, you can make a note and say the internet was not working. Does that make sense? Because I have a feeling they did not. We have 2 internet systems and one of them's down today. So if you're having internet problems, you can always summarize from your textbook. Okay, online learners, everybody say goodbye.
Bye.
See you tomorrow. Have a nice night.